Professor Mungekar will present thoughts of Baba Saheb Ambedkar on labor policy and labor welfare. I would request Professor Mungekar to start his presentation.
Thank you, Vijay. Thank you very much. Shri Vijay Ji Mahajan, who is the director of Rajiv Gandhi Center for Contemporary Studies, and Mr. Vijay Pratap, my close colleague for last 40 years in socialist movement in India, the co-convener of this program. It's great opportunity for me that Rajiv Gandhi Foundation as well as the Rajiv Gandhi Center for Contemporary Studies has, or rather is being offering to me occasionally to express my views on the topics of contemporary relevance for our country. Today, they have asked me to speak about Dr. Ambedkar's contribution to labor policy and labor welfare. Now, as you know that Dr. Ambedkar was a genuinely multifaceted personality. He was a lawyer, he was professor of political economy, he was the social emancipator of the downtrodden and the neglected sections of the society. He was champion of women's rights who resigned from Nehru's cabinet on when he saw that the Hindu Code Bill was not being passed by the then cabinet because of the tremendous opposition from the outside communal elements and as well as from within the Congress party. He was staff editor of 3-4 major Marathi journals such as Mukanayak, Vaishkrut Bharat, and also one English fortnightly called Janata. Dr. Ambedkar was barrister. But of all these things, of course, people know that he was a principal architect of the Indian Constitution. And he earned that acclaim from none other than Dr. Rajendra Prasad, who was the chairman of the Constituent Assembly of India. One important characteristic or feature of Dr. Ambedkar's personality remained neglected till 1991 was Dr. Ambedkar was top-ranking professional economist. I think till today, not a single Indian economist with credit or her credit 2 degrees, one PhD from Columbia University for his seminal contribution in public finance, evolution of provincial finance in British India, and the Doctor of Science for his again seminal contribution in monetary theory, the problem of the rupee, its origins and solutions. The first research he did under Professor Seligman, and the second supervisor was Edwin Cannon. And one surprises to know that both Professor Seligman and Professor Edwin Cannon, when they wrote preface to Dr. Ambedkar's published dissertations, both of them they have mentioned that we disagreed with Dr. Ambedkar on some of the issues, but they were magnanimous in arguing and putting forward that it is undoubtedly true that Dr. Ambedkar in his dissertation brought a fresh air to the topics under the consideration. So the supervisors, those who guided him for his PhD and DSc, you know, DSc is generally honorary degree for the contributions that one makes to different fields of knowledge. But Dr. Ambedkar earned DSc, and it's the problem of rupee and its solution, its origin and solutions. Today we released at the hands of Mr. Ajit Pawar, the Deputy Chief Minister of Maharashtra, its Marathi translation. And it was indeed gratifying. So before I say something about our Ambedkar's contribution to labor welfare and labor policy, let us try to understand the philosophical approach of Ambedkar to the labor problem. Dr. Ambedkar delivered a presidential address in 1932 to Manmad railway workers, GIP workers, where he has categorically made a statement, opening statement of his speech was as follows, and I quote, uh, Brahminism and capitalism, these are the twin enemies of the laboring classes. Please remember that he said the twin enemies of the laboring classes. He didn't say scheduled caste or scheduled tribes. He said laboring classes, all those who are working physically. In economics, there are two types of labor. One is mental labor and second is physical labor. But today, all economies in the world, they're taking care more of the people, those who are mental workers than the physical laborers, and more so in the countries which were developed, which are underdeveloped, unlike most of the Western countries. That's why Brahminism and capitalism, because he equated Brahminism with caste system and capitalism, these are the twin enemies of the laboring classes. And he further mentioned, I hasten to add that by Brahminism, I don't refer to Brahmins, those who are born in Brahmin caste. By Brahminism, I mean attitude and the inclinations, the dominant urge of monopolizing everything. People sometimes are misunderstanding Dr. Ambedkar's approach towards Brahmin as Brahminism. Number of people, number of prominent social workers who helped in his social movement of emancipation of the untouchables, and as well as in building the People's Education Society, there were prominent upper caste, particularly we call them the CKPs, such as Surbanana Tipnis, Chitre, and again many other fellows, Pradhan. Those were working with him shoulder to shoulder. That's why let's not make mistake of understanding or equating Brahminism with Brahmins by caste. And he further said that that kind of attitude is rampant in all sections of the society. Now, what I mean is that I brought this dimension of Ambedkar's philosophical approach to labor problem because he was against Brahminism, that is caste system, and the whole life he struggled against the evolution of the caste system, the untouchability, and fight against Brahminism. Its pernicious ideology and doctrine and social thinking, social structure, which is creating problem for the country even today. Capitalism was opposed in the sense that system is based on exploitation. Whatever may be the virtues of capitalist economy, its development, its innovation, as Peter said, technology, the advancement, higher rate of economic growth, all these things notwithstanding, fact remains that because of the private property right to ownership of the means of production, those who are not having the ownership of the means of production, they have to work physically and depend upon their employers for whatever wages or other privileges they are offering to the working classes. Now, having said this, Dr. Ambedkar was having tremendous compassion for all neglected sections of the society. It's not only for scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. Unfortunately, Indians look upon Ambedkar as only savior of the scheduled caste and the former untouchable. This is the greatest travesty of truth. Dr. Ambedkar was champion of the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes interest because for thousands of years they were marginalized, exploited, remained disadvantaged, they remained backward, they were just lunatic, did not enable themselves to get any benefit of economic, social, political development and so on. But he was genuine social thinker, he was genuine social scientist par excellence. And that is why since he was having compassion for all sections of the society, naturally labor was one. And in the capitalist economy, now today the mainstream economic system, they have removed the word capitalism. That is hypocrisy on the part of the modern economic discipline. They call it market economy, as if capitalism does not refer to market economy, because market is the central feature. It is the central point of the capitalist economy. But capitalism implies something more than market requirement. That's why all present day mainstream economies, they are shying away rather deliberately. It's not by accident. It is by design that the word market economy has replaced the term capitalism. With myself, Professor Nachne, we were student of economics in 60s and 70s, who had study of comparative economic systems. And at that point of time, socialism, communism, capitalism, all the system that we are under study. Now today, those days are gone. Since he was compassionate towards labor problems and labor welfare, when Dr. Ambedkar became labor member in the Viceroy's Executive Council during the period from 1942 to 1946, he seized the opportunity to do every possible thing within his command, within his limitations, and within his right and mind to do for the labor welfare. Now you can imagine he was a labor member, then labor minister in the Viceroy's Executive Council. Viceroy's Executive Council, it was the British ministry in India to manage the affairs of India. It was alien government, and it was stupendously difficult for Ambedkar to do any possible thing, and still he got the all basic post-independent labor legislation that we are witnessing today. Those were originated during Ambedkar's tenure as a member of the Viceroy Executive Council. It's not possible. I would have been happy to finish within 20-25 minutes, but it's just impossible. I will just mention a few legislation that Ambedkar introduced in the central legislature. There were two legislatures. One was provincial legislature. After 1935 Government of India Act, and the provincial governments came into existence in 1937, and the central legislature, that was indeed just like parliament. Just with your permission, I will just mention the only laws, names of labor legislation that Ambedkar suggested in labor policy. It would take not more than 2 to 3 minutes, and then I will specify, as Vijay was saying, the essence of his genesis and welfare of labor problem. The first, he dealt with the need for uniformity in labor legislation. Even today, as we are discussing on 16th December 2021, there is no standard definition of workman in India's labor welfare policy. Worker, workman. I mean, Ambedkar was the first. There should be uniformity in labor legislation. Now, labor today is in concurrent list. Major subject it is in state list, but it's concurrent list. Second is grant of inadequate dearness allowances to the worker, that he took the issue. Then the election of member to the standing committee for the labor department. Ambedkar discovered the standing committee, that every ministry, government should have a standing committee to discuss the problems of labor as and when they arise. Because he was aware that labor problems will be continuously erupting, and they should be dealt with care and compassion. The war injuries compensation insurance bill that he proposed. Employment exchange of skilled and semi-skilled, that we should have the skilled labor and the mechanism for developing skilled labor. The war injuries compensation insurance bill. Today we are having, when workers are sustaining injuries while on work, they are paid the compensation. Ambedkar made the beginning of that during his period. Then Mines Maternity Benefit Act. At that time, even women were workers were working in mines. And before coming of the General Maternity Benefit Act, he first introduced that the female mine workers maternity benefit act. He started war injuries compensation insurance bill, because precisely the period when Ambedkar was member of labor in the Viceroy Executive Council, It was the Second World War period from 1939 to 1945. And that's why war injuries, compensation of bill. Plenary labor conference. Today we are having labor plenary session and standing committee, tripartite committee. All they were originated during Ambedkar's time. They were shaped and reshaped and refined subsequently, but then their foundation was laid down by Dr. Ambedkar. Dr. Ambedkar has extensively written about the labor and the parliamentary democracy because since he was largely anti-Marxist or other anti-communist, we should be careful while using the word anti-Marxist and anti-communist. A person may be a communist and will have to be Marxist, but every Marxist is not necessarily communist. If we understand Marxism as a broad discipline, broad perspective, broad outlook to analyze the social situation, then the distinction between Marxism and communism is very valid. But Ambedkar was absolutely anti-communism for various reasons, and partly they are justified. He was talking about promotion of labor welfare in India. Then advisory committee for coalition of worker mind, factories amendment bill, post-war employment and skill workers, the payment of wages act. Today, after 1991, when labor when economic reforms came, some of the economists in the country, they are talking about inverse relationship between the wage level and the employment. Now, this was Professor Alfred Pigu's theory, wage per theory. Now, despite tremendous development of technology and capitalist economies advancement, I feel pity about the economists that they say that every factory may not be in position to pay the minimum wage. So forget about the ethical dimensions of this argument or philosophical dimension. Let us understand that labor is the only. That's why if you are not giving sufficiently reasonable, good level of wages to the workers, then who will demand the production, the commodities and the services produced in the economy? There is underconsumption. And underconsumption is one of the trade cycle explanation given by Marx. Today, we are having more than 425 million tons of food grains and nearly 25% remaining poverty line. What does it mean? It means that people do not have adequate purchasing power. Now people are discussing that they have changed the consumption pattern, this, that is paltry explanation. But then Amartya Sen has developed his theory of economic entitlements. It's not that necessary that the scarcity of food grain causes the famines, but the lack of entitlement, there is the purchasing power. I told Amartya Sen that along with your economic entitlements, you also should add social entitlements so far the caste dimensions of Indian society is concerned. Post-war electric power, you know that Ambedkar developed the multi-purpose river valley projects. That is the greatest contribution. Ambedkar's contribution to the multi-purpose river valley projects, such as Mahanadi project, Damodar Valley projects, Tungabhadra projects, Hirakud projects, because till then, people were thinking that river water could be just used for drinking and maximum for irrigation. We developed the concept of hydroelectric project. Yes, Ambedkar's contribution is the single largest contribution so far the water development and irrigation policy in this country is concerned. You'll find labor policy and government of India. The Mines Better by benefit, the Matter Benefit Act. Now I can go on, but it is the bird's eye view that Ambedkar was deeply concerned about labor welfare and good living conditions for the workers, good living conditions for their families, their children, opportunities for education, opportunities for their development. I will mention, as Vijay said, that what is the relevance of Dr. Ambedkar's thought on this matter. Now, Ambedkar was also wanting that labor should have developed international perspective. Because even at that point of time when he was writing, he was quite aware of the global capitalist system. You know that Lenin's theory of imperialism, highest stage of capitalism, in the sense that where see you can have best possible wages for the workers, but that 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 doesn't nullify the existence of the exploitation. Now the question is, Ambedkar was arguing that the real creed of working class is internationalism, and he was slightly critical of Indian national movement. Now people can have different kind of opinions, but then he was arguing that labor must play a decisive role in Indian freedom movement, and they played the decisive role. In fact, he delivered a lecture on 8th August 1942, one day before Quit India movement began. It is 9th August, but he delivered the lecture, and he argued that uh, we must win the war, and there are certain other issues also he has discussed. Now, when I say that workers in the world unite, that slogan Marx had given, recently I was reading once again Marx, and I realized that it may be wrong, but Marx never visited any factory as such. He did not go to factory and see the working conditions that workers were suffering. He was just visualizing. He was just anticipating. He was just conceptualizing that capitalist as a world economic order, the conditions of the working class, with some differences between the developed and underdeveloped countries, they will be having some semblance of uh, some unity or uniformity, and that is their exploitation. Why I mention this, that workers in the world unite, that communists gave the slogan thereafter, and Ambedkar's argument that workers have definitely international creed. Nationalism is just means, but workers' real creed is internationalism. I will just take 1 minute. When he said, labor's creed is internationalism. Labor is interested in nationalism only because the wheels of democracy, such as representative parliaments, responsible executive, and constitutional convention, etc., work better in a community united by national sentiments. Nationalism to labor is only a means to an end. It is not an end in itself, to which labor can agree to sacrifice what it regards as the most essential principles of life. Unquote. It means that freedom was absolutely necessary, but that freedom would solve all the economic problems of the working classes is not true. Now, this argument could be stretched further, that economic growth is a necessary condition for the elevation of poverty and expansion of employment. But mere higher rate of economic growth does not solve automatically, I'm emphasizing the word automatically, the problem of unemployment and the poverty, unless state is positively intervening through the policies, appropriate welfare policies, inclined towards the working classes, irrespective of the caste, language, religion. And today we know the pathetic conditions of the working class in India. Let us take the case of Bombay slum dwellers. 85 lakh people today, they are living in slums. Who are they? They're essentially coming from the laboring classes. That's why Ambedkar was prophecy was that automatically freedom was absolutely necessary. There is no doubt about it. That is human need, that to express, to have his personal sovereignty. But then, so far economic conditions and economic betterment is concerned, the state intervention is positively necessary. Now, you can understand that Ambedkar's further argument, that he was arguing that labor should not be happy only with the higher wages. They must get higher wages, reasonably good wages, decent living conditions, but laboring classes should not be happy only with these conditions once they are fulfilled. He wanted political power in the hands of the working class. And therefore, you may be aware, probably all of you, in 1936, Ambedkar established Independent Labour Party. Now, he was directly connected to Professor Harold Lasky. Harold Lasky's Grammar of Politics tremendously influenced him, which I am reading once again. Now, what happens is, Lasky was supposed to be Fabian socialist, along with John Bernard Shaw and many others. But the question is, Ambedkar was the only political economist who named his party after Labour, Independent Labour Party. You know that Ambedkar wanted a bi-party political system. He was having American model or British model. Today we are having 100 political parties and they are just scattered and etc. I don't want to comment into whether it's good or bad. But then Ambedkar was arguing that there should be strong opposition political parties of the laboring classes, of the exploited sections of the society. And in 1937, on Independent Labour Party platform, he contested the first election in 1937 and got 14 candidates elected in Maharashtra, out of which 7 were upper caste. Today, scheduled castes are demanding reservations with the upper caste. In 1937, out of 14, he brought 7 upper caste candidates, non-scheduled caste candidates elected on his platform. You can imagine today Maharashtra local organization level selections are being supposed to be postponed because OBCs are not getting reservation. Ambedkar at that point of time brought number of people, including Brahmins and then your OBCs and other people elected. Now, the other last 2 points. One is Ambedkar was always arguing, and even at that point of time when Second World War was going on, he argued that government of India, the British government of India, spending and wasting the resources on destructive, for destructive purpose. And he has given the example, if 100 crores of rupees rather than spending on war and equipment and destruction, please let us remember what is Ambedkar's courage and conviction. He was member or minister in the Viceroy's Executive Council, that is British Ministry of to run Indian affairs. And there he told them how much money you are spending on war. And he gave the example, if 100 crores of rupees, rather than spending on war, if you would have spent on schools, how many schools should have been constructed? How many dispensaries would have been constructed? How many roads should have been constructed? How many drinking water wells should have been constructed? It is beyond imagination that the British government, of which he was minister, to ask his master this kind of question. Today, our academics, our intellectuals, whatever is going on in the country, for one reason or the other, there is no sufficient strong voice is raised. So Ambedkar, when British government viceroy, at that time he raised the question, and he said that we must have government should think about genuinely about labor welfare. Now the 2 last points. One is Dr. Ambedkar's argument was Indian trade union movement could not overcome the evils of the caste system. You see, all labor leaders, they are coming from upper caste. Even for that matter, all socialist leaders and all communist leaders, those who are championing the cause of the democratic socialism and communism, they could not develop the leadership from the downtrodden. Now, some of the people might be feeling offended, but as a social activist, my job is to offend the people when I feel it is necessary to offend. Now the question is, in 1928, when there was cotton textile strike in Mumbai, Ambedkar was saying that the scheduled caste workers should be recruited in cloth department, where cloth department we have to put the thread into the needle by touching your feet. Comrade Dange said that, no, Dr. Ambedkar, I can't do that. If I do, then my movement of the labor movement will be split up, because caste workers will not be accepting this. This situation today also was present. In 1974, when the textile strike was going on, at that time, all workers were together for the bonus question of workers on the meetings in the meetings and the gates of the mill. And when when the caste strike took place, when the workers were going to their respective chores, there is complete barricade. On one hand, you will get police and police, upper caste in the sense non-scheduled caste, the list, and on the other side, you are having chores occupied by the list. Workers were shouting on the gates of the mills that all workers are united. But the moment they go their homes, there was caste right, and they were trying to sit on the throat of each other. This is the tragedy of the Indian labor movement, which the leaders of the movement could not try to overcome. The next point is, and the last point is, labor leaders could not in this country. I was teaching labor economics nearly 15 years in the University of Mumbai, postgraduate students. And I was saying, I'm repeating, of course, you are, it may be nothing new to you. But then the entire trade union movement remained confined to the demand for the higher wages and annual bonus. They never took the cause of the improvement of the living conditions of the workers. I once told Dr. Datta Samant, who was a prominent leader of the engineer workers, and then who came to lead the cotton textile strike, that what are your demands? You never demanded housing for workers. Today, I mentioned about 85 lakh workers. The same is situation in Delhi, Kolkata, Bangalore, Pune, Nagpur, Aurangabad, Patna, everywhere. All working class people, all slum, they are destined to live in slums, working conditions, for example. That's why Ambedkar was critic of the labor leaders, that they never took other than non-wage issues of the working class. As a result of which, they were dominated by what is called in technical language as economism. Labor leaders could not develop a broad perspective. And then I told you that Dr. Ambedkar wanted these policies in favor of the labor, and which would be impossible from his point of view, that unless labor shares political power, then the ruling classes, according to him, they were coming from the upper castes and upper classes. Ruling classes I'm talking about, I'm not talking about the change of a political party. Okay? Because after 1947, all political parties, they have come and gone, but the ruling classes remain the same. Let us understand very clearly. Whatever government, the only difference is some governments were progressive market economy, some governments were reactionary market economy. Because capitalism evolved over a period of time. It is not the same as when Adam Smith and David Ricardo and John Stuart Mill, they were talking about. So while coming to the end of this, one last point I must mention. Today, nearly 90% workers in India, they are working in unorganized sector. They do not have any social security. They do not have any social protection. No provident fund, no gratuity, no health insurance. They are absolutely living in pathetic conditions. Now, two things are responsible for this. One, the way working class movement is at the receiving end because of the global onslaught of the capital, and that is why it is at the receiving end. And second, the state, which was doing the role of the welfare state, is getting further and further eroded. And now they are raising, see how they are raising the flimsy argument, or is absolutely non-tenable argument. Nobody is saying that state should replace market. Even the people, those who are critical of market economy, also do not say that market is dispensable. I would say rather, in any economic mechanism, market, in within socialist economy also there has to be market, but that market will be different from slightly or largely also from the market in the capitalist economy. Now the question is, market is indispensable, but with everything it is left to the market, then those who are not able to enter the market economy becomes irrelevant. And that is why positive, judicious, welfare-oriented, compassionate attitude and intervention of the state, that according to me could be called as the sum and substance of Dr. Ambedkar's philosophical perspective of labor policy and labor welfare. Thank you very much, all of you, for your patient hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Mungekar. Can I invite the invited discussants, first both of them, and then I can see Professor Ravi Srivastava. I would also request him to add his comments.
Ravi, congratulations. Thank you very much, Ravi, for coming. We are close friends, by the way.
Yeah, I know. That's why I requested him to come.
Very good. You are doing my job, anyway.
Yes, your PR work.
No, I keep you Delhi only for that, okay?
Okay.
Okay.
So you wanted Dr. Nachane to be the first discussant. Can you come, Dr. Nachane, unmute yourself? Can you unmute yourself, Arunji?
So I sent him the request for unmute.
Yeah,
he did this.
Mungekar ji, next request किसको भेजना है?
No, Ravi Srivastava, of course, Hari Baba, he is.
Okay.
What about
Ravi ji? रवि श्रीवास्तव जी को भेज दीजिएगा अरुण जी नेक्स्ट. Yes, sorry. Please carry on.
Hello, should I speak?
Yes, sir. Please.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Mungekar.
Thank you, Ravi, for coming. Thank you. It's great honor.
Sir, sorry to disturb you. Can you do little bit down your camera? Little bit down.
Yes.
Is it all right?
Yeah, it's fine now. It's fine now. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. As expected, Dr. Balchandra Mungekar gave a masterly exposition of Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar's thoughts on various aspects, but with particular reference to labor economics. Now, I would just make a very few and very brief observations, okay? Because I realize the value of time, okay? And there are several other speakers. So let me very briefly touch upon some of the issues raised by Dr. Mungekar, on which, of course, you see, he will possibly elaborate, okay, in the later half of his lecture. Now, I think there is a basic continuity and unity of purpose in the Indian economic thought of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. If one looks at thinkers like Mahadev Govind Ranade, Dada Saheb Nauroji, Gopal Krishna Gokhale, Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar, and some others, there is a basic unity of purpose in the sense that all of them were inspired by three ideals. One is nationalism, and of course reflected in the desire to be independent of foreign rule. The second is economic development, and the third is social development. Now, some thinkers thought that social development could come without economic development. Other thinkers separated economic development from social development. But I think it was Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar who saw that the Trinity, that there was no contradiction in this Trinity, and that nationalism, economic development, and social development all go hand in hand. And I think that is a very, very basic contribution of Dr. Baba Saheb to Indian economic thought. Okay. Let me, while we are on the subject of Indian economic thought, let me also mention a very important contribution, two important contributions made by Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar. One, which was evident in the famous Hilton Commission 1 shilling 6 pence versus 1 shilling 4 pence controversy. Here, whereas Mahatma Gandhi and some other thinkers were arguing for a higher value of the rupee, for a lower value of the rupee, okay, Dr. Ambedkar, in my opinion, possibly the first to do so, pointed out the dangers of devaluation and the likely effect that devaluation is going to have not only on the laboring class, but also on the general population. Okay? And I think that Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar's writings on that point deserve to be studied by modern economists, okay, with a great deal of attention. Dr. Mungekar, the other point I would like to emphasize is that Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar also paid a great deal of attention to the Marxist concept of exploitation. Okay, Marx was certainly very well versed in Marxian theology, in Marxian theory, and he saw correctly, as you mentioned toward the end of your lecture, that exploitation occurs not only by keeping wages down, but also via lengthening working hours and by reducing worker safety or safeguards of working conditions. Now here, I would like to mention some of the modern literature which has cropped up in the wake of the proposed labor reforms proposed by this government. One of the arguments which is being made is that this so-called worker safeguards and you see the various safety measures which have been introduced, working conditions and so on, they act as a barrier to increase employment. And here, the intellectual inspiration for this point of view comes from the Beasley-Burgess thesis, two British economists who advanced the thesis that lowering the safety considerations or not bothering too much about labor safety guarantees and so on would actually increase employment. Now, I think that is a very, very debatable point, a very controversial point. For one thing, as an econometrician, I can tell you that Beasley-Burgess's econometrics on which they base their conclusion is very heavily flawed. It's very heavily flawed. You see, and we have discussed this. I've discussed this with several people. Okay. Now, let me come to two very, very modern issues. Okay. One is what has happened to the wage share in India. Okay. I'm sure nobody can give me an answer. Okay. Because our national accounts are structured in such a way that the relative share of wages and profits in national income, okay, is hidden. Okay. Unless your national income is reoriented. And here I'm reminded very much of Miss Kanta Randive, who was both Dr. Mungekar's teacher and my teacher also, who wrote a very important book. I think it was called Income Distribution, the Unresolved Puzzle. Okay. where she for the first time calculated the relative wage shares of wage and profit, the relative shares of wages and profits in India's national income. But that is now outdated work, okay? And we need to reorient our national accounts in such a way that the wage share and the profit shares are clearly brought out, and we know whether the wage share is increasing, decreasing, or remaining constant. One last point which I would like to touch upon, and on which I'm sure Dr. Mungekar will have some views, is this issue of financialization. If one looks at the way liberalization has been proceeding in the last decade or 2 decades, one would find that the role of the finance sector has been increasing substantially. And what is not recognized, this phenomenon has sometimes been called as financialization. Okay? If you look at the proportion of national income which is arising from the financial sector, which was earlier something like 4 to 5%, has now increased in India to about 10 to 12%, nearly doubled. What are the implications of this? We have no studies in the Indian context. See, I'm proposing to undertake some studies with the help of some colleagues. But at the moment, we have no evidence on this. But evidence is available in some of the Western market economies of Europe and the United States and Canada. And according to them, financialization aggravates the inequality. General inequality is aggravated, but it also aggravates racial discrimination. It also aggravates racial discrimination in the sense that it has been found that the share of wages accruing to white workers in the United States, for example, has been increasing due to financialization in reference to black workers, Mexicans, and so on, Asians, and so on. Not only that, it aggravates gender inequality in the sense that male wages and male salaries are rising because of financialization relative to the share of female wages and female wages and salaries. And I think this is more or less my somewhat hasty reaction to on the spot reaction to Dr. Mungekar's thesis. Okay, and once again I thank you, sir, very much for a very, very masterly exposition, and I'm sure more things will come out in the deliberation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Nach.
Professor Ravi Srivastava.
अंबेडकर जी का जो दृष्टांत था वो इन दोनों से उभरता था। उनका जो उन्होंने सामाजिक उत्पीड़न को और दलित उत्पीड़न को समझने की कोशिश की, लेकिन साथ साथ उन्होंने उतना ही ध्यान श्रम के उत्पीड़न को भी उतना ही ध्यान दिया। और जैसा कि प्रोफेसर मुंगेकर ने कहा, और मैं एक बार जैसा बहुत अच्छा मुझे लगा कि इस वार्ता के दौरान मैं उनको सुन सका और प्रोफेसर नचाने को भी सुन सका, दोनों लोगों को सुन सका।
रवि, थैंक यू वेरी मच, थैंक यू।
तो ये अंबेडकर की मतलब एक गहरी संवेदना, जहाँ और पूरा उनका जो दार्शनिक और विश्लेषण था, आर्थिक विश्लेषण था, जहाँ एक उन्होंने दलितों की स्थिति पर इतना ज्यादा काम किया और इतना ज्यादा लिखा, वहाँ श्रम भी उनकी एक तरीके से उनकी सोच के केंद्र में थे। और जैसा कि डॉक्टर मुंगेकर ने कहा, इंडिपेंडेंट लेबर पार्टी का उन्होंने की नींव रखी, और एक्चुअली भारत के नए संविधान में भी बहुत सारे जो लेबर कानून जो कि मुख्य रूप से सन 50 के दशक में आए, उन लेबर कानूनों की बुनियाद भी डॉक्टर अंबेडकर ने रखी। इतना मैंने उस दौरान, जबकि ट्रेड यूनियन आंदोलन में काम कर रहा था और दलित आंदोलन में काम कर रहा था, तब उस समय डॉक्टर अंबेडकर को पढ़ने की कोशिश की। और मैं ये कह सकता हूँ कि मैंने उनका मराठी लेखन नहीं पढ़ा, लेकिन अंग्रेजी लेखन में मैं शायद ही किसी, मुश्किल से एक दो लोगों के साथ उनकी तुलना कर सकता हूँ, जितना स्पष्ट और विश्लेषक ढंग से उन्होंने अलग अलग विषयों पर लिखा। और शायद उनके जैसा बुद्धिजीवी भारत में कम, शायद उनके बराबर कोई और शायद कम ही पैदा हुए होंगे, जो मेरी जानकारी में है। जब अंबेडकर जब तक जीवित थे, जब तक कार्य कर रहे थे, तब तक भारत का जो सामाजिक आर्थिक संरचना थी, वो संभवतः आज की सामाजिक आर्थिक संरचना से भिन्न है। और मैं सिर्फ बहुत सारा परिवर्तन हुआ है पिछले 65-70 वर्षों में, लेकिन 2-3 परिवर्तनों के मैं और आपका ध्यान दिलाना चाहूंगा। एक तो उस समय भारत में पूंजीवाद प्रधान नहीं था। हम एक तरीके से पूर्व पूंजीवाद समाज से और अर्थव्यवस्था से उभर रहे थे। प्री कैपिटलिस्ट जो अर्थव्यवस्था है, उससे भारत उभर रहा था। कैपिटलिज्म वाज, आई डोंट थिंक, मेरे हालांकि हम ब्रिटिश कॉलोनी जरूर थे, लेकिन हमारे मतलब पूंजीवाद, उस तरह से पूंजीवाद का वर्चस्व नहीं था जिस तरह से आज ग्लोबल कैपिटलिज्म और नेशनल स्तर पर कैपिटलिज्म का वर्चस्व है। एक प्रमुख बात ये भी है कि ग्लोबलाइजेशन के साथ पूंजीवाद का चरित्र बिल्कुल बदल गया है, बहुत हद तक बदल गया है। और सन 80 के बाद से, और खासतौर से सन लेट 80s 90 के दशक में पूंजीवाद और श्रम के बीच का जो बैलेंस है, संतुलन है, वो बहुत ज्यादा पूंजी के पक्ष में हो गया है। और भारत में ही नहीं, पूरी दुनिया में जो प्रोडक्शन की जो संरचना है, उसमें बहुत परिवर्तन हुआ है। प्रोडक्शन अब सप्लाई चेन्स, ग्लोबल सप्लाई चेन्स के तौर पर प्रोडक्शन का एक तरीके से पुनः संरचनित किया जा रहा है। और फ्लेक्सिबल लेबर, जिसको हम कहते हैं इनफॉर्मल लेबर और फ्लेक्सिबल लेबर, उस पर जब बहुत ज्यादा जोर है। मतलब देयर इज अ राइज ऑफ इनफॉर्मेलिटी इवन इन द ऑर्गेनाइज सेक्टर ऑफ द इंडियन इकोनॉमी, बहुत ज्यादा, अगर आप उसको देखने की कोशिश करें। और कॉन्ट्रैक्टर बेस्ड रिलेशनशिप्स लेबर में, इस वजह से सर्कुलर माइग्रेशन, कॉन्ट्रैक्टर बेस्ड रिलेशनशिप्स बहुत ज्यादा इम्पॉर्टेंट हो गई है, बहुत ज्यादा महत्वपूर्ण हो गई है। ट्रेड यूनियन आंदोलन भारत में जब खड़ा हुआ, और जिस तरह से उसका बहुत महत्वपूर्ण भूमिका समय समय पर रही है, मैं उसको अंडररेट नहीं कर सकते हैं, बहुत महत्वपूर्ण भूमिका रही है। और भारत में जो श्रम की को विजय प्राप्त हुई, जो श्रम के कानूनों में तब्दीली हुई, उसमें ट्रेड यूनियन आंदोलन की प्रमुख भूमिका रही है। लेकिन इसमें कोई शक नहीं है कि ट्रेड यूनियन आंदोलन मुख्य रूप से बाद में क्रमशः एक इकोनॉमिस्टिक आंदोलन में तब्दील हो गया, जैसा कि डॉक्टर मुंगेकर ने कहा। और क्योंकि संगठित क्षेत्र में जो औपचारिक श्रम संबंध जो थे वो स्थापित थे, मुख्य रूप से फॉर्मल एम्प्लॉयमेंट रिलेशंस थे, तो ट्रेड यूनियन आंदोलन यही नहीं कि इकोनॉमिस्टिक डिमांड्स पर में सीमित रह गया, बट मेनली it remained confined to the formal workers, the formally employed workers. ठेके पर मजदूर थे और इस जो बदली मजदूर थे वगैरह, उनके आंदोलनों में बहुत हद तक शरीक नहीं हो पाया। और इसीलिए हमने सन 70 और 80 के दशक में देखा कि जब भारत में उद्योगों का और इंडस्ट्रियल रिलेशंस का चरित्र बदलने लगा, तो हम दत्ता सामंत जैसे चरित्र को ट्रेड यूनियन आंदोलन में देखते हैं। और बेसिकली दिस वाज अ ट्रांजिशनल फेज in capitalist relations in India, in basically industrial relations in India, and the transformation that was taking place in industrial capitalism in India. लेकिन सन 90 के दशक के बाद से बहुत तेजी से इनफॉर्मलाइजेशन हिंदुस्तान में हुआ, और उस इनफॉर्मलाइजेशन की जो लहर थी, उसमें उसको ट्रेड यूनियन आंदोलन तो ना बहुत दशकों तक तो समझ भी नहीं पाया, और उसको उससे निपटने में तो बिल्कुल असमर्थ था। तो जहां एक और ट्रेड यूनियन आंदोलन ग्रेजुअली धीरे धीरे सिकुड़ते हुए एक इकोनॉमिस्टिक आंदोलन में तब्दील हुआ इंडिपेंडेंस के बाद, तो वहीं पर हम ये भी देखते हैं कि और उसका वो जो फॉर्मली एम्प्लॉयड जो वर्कर्स थे, उनमें सिमटा जो संगठित क्षेत्र थे, वर्कर्स थे, मुख्य रूप से उनमें सिमट कर रह गया। वहीं दूसरी ओर जब तब्दीली तेजी से होने लगी संगठित क्षेत्र में, इंडस्ट्रियल रिलेशंस में, तो ट्रेड यूनियन आंदोलन और ज्यादा सिमट गया, और वो बेसिकली जो वर्किंग क्लास का जो अपर क्रस्ट था, फॉर्मली एम्प्लॉयड लोगों का, जो बेसिकली उनमें सिमट कर रह गया। शुरू से ही ट्रेड यूनियन आंदोलन जो एक जैसा कि आई थिंक डॉक्टर मुंगेकर ने कहा और बहुत स्पष्ट रूप से कहा कि जो यहाँ पर सामाजिक और आर्थिक उत्पीड़न की जो चक्रव्यूह था, बेसिकली द वे दे आर निटेड टुगेदर, उनको ट्रेड यूनियन आंदोलन बहुत कभी भी कायदे से निपट नहीं सका। और हम फिर ग्रेजुअली हम ये देखते हैं कि उस सिमटने के साथ साथ जो नए तरीके से अगर आप देखें तो कैपिटलिज्म जो डेवलप किया, ग्लोबल कैपिटलिज्म जो डेवलप किया हिंदुस्तान में 90 और 2000 के दशक में, उसने जो यहाँ की सामाजिक संरचना थी उसका पूरा इस्तेमाल किया। व्हाट वी फाइंड इज कि इनफॉर्मलाइजेशन और ये जो पूरी सर्कुलर माइग्रेशन की जो प्रक्रिया थी, उसने और भी ज्यादा जो निचले स्तर पर सामाजिक तबका था उसको श्रम के और भी निचले कागार पर पहुंचा दिया। बेसिकली जो सबसे गंदा, सबसे कठिन और सबसे जो खतरनाक काम उद्योगों में आज हो रहा है, और उद्योगों के बाहर भी जो हो रहा है, सार्वजनिक क्षेत्र में भी हो रहा है, सेवाओं के क्षेत्र में भी हो रहा है, वो बेसिकली जो सामाजिक उत्पीड़ित वर्ग है, जो दलित वर्ग है, वो उस काम को कर रहा है। और यही सबसे ज्यादा प्रिकेरियसली एम्प्लॉयड भी है आज के युग में, और ट्रेड यूनियन आंदोलन इनको रिप्रेजेंट करने में पूरी तरह से असमर्थ रहा। इसके हमने कई मिसाल देखी। हमने शायद मेरे ख्याल से 6 बरस, 7 बरस, 8 बरस हुए होंगे जब केरला में प्लांटेशन में कॉन्ट्रैक्ट वर्कर्स हड़ताल पर गए, और केरला जैसे प्रदेश में उन्होंने संगठित ट्रेड यूनियंस को वर्जित कर दिया उस आंदोलन में आने से, शामिल होने से। कोई भी संगठित ट्रेड यूनियन के लीडरशिप से, मतलब उन्होंने कहा कि कोई भी संगठित ट्रेड यूनियन का लीडरशिप हमारे बीच नहीं आएगा इस आंदोलन के दौरान। इतना ज्यादा वे विमुख हो गए थे संगठित ट्रेड यूनियन लीडरशिप से। तो ये एक दुर्भाग्य की बात है कि जब हमको इस समय लेबर पर जिस तरह का प्रहार हुआ है पिछले कुछ वर्षों में, लेबर कोड्स के माध्यम से 100 साल की जो लेबर की जो उपलब्धि थी, यूनियनाइजेशन की जो उपलब्धि थी, उसको पीछे ढकेल दिया गया है इन द इंटरेस्ट ऑफ लिबरलाइजेशन, in the interest of flexibilization, in the interest of capital, and in the state of in the interest of a state which is promoting unbridled capitalism, जैसा कि डॉक्टर नाचन्य ने कहा और डॉक्टर मुंगेकर ने कहा। लेकिन ऐसे समय पर जो प्रतिवादी आवाजें हैं, voices that can protest this massive change which is sweeping us, वो बहुत कमजोर हो गई। उसको हम आर्थिक क्षेत्र में भी देख सकते हैं। डॉक्टर नचानी ने सही कहा कि नेशनल अकाउंट्स में हम प्रॉफिट और वेजेस का शेयर नहीं देख सकते, लेकिन हम संगठित मैन्युफैक्चरिंग में फॉर एग्जांपल ASI के आंकड़ों में देख सकते हैं। और हम ये देख सकते हैं कि सन 91-92 के बाद से बराबर जो वेजेस का शेयर है वो गिर के सन 91-92 के समय से भी आधा हो गया, लगभग आधा हो गया। तो ये एक बड़ी तब्दीली हुई है और इस तब्दीली के पीछे हमारे वर्किंग क्लास आंदोलन की कमजोरी रही है। और इस समय में इस पूरे आंदोलन को नए सिरे से खड़ा करना और इस सामाजिक और आर्थिक उत्पीड़न के बीच का जो बिल्कुल अंतरंग संबंध है, जिसको डॉक्टर अंबेडकर ने उजागर करने की कोशिश की थी, उसको समझना बहुत जरूरी हो जाता है। बेसिकली आई थिंक हिज मेजर कंट्रीब्यूशन वाज नॉट ओनली recognizing, I mean, among his so many other contributions, not only recognizing the nature of social oppression, but also in recognizing labor as a class. And when you recognize labor as a class, you are talking about the interlinkage between social and economic exploitation. Inevitably speaking about the interlinkage between the two. And actually, this has to be put center stage once again if the fight of labor against unbridled capitalism has to be again reconstructed in a way that we can move towards an equitable society, a society where all sections of society have a share in its prospects, in its growth, in its development. तो आई थिंक विजय जी, सॉरी मैं ज्यादा बोल गया, और लेकिन डॉक्टर मुंगेकर को, डॉक्टर नाचने को सुनने का अवसर मिला और आपने इस संगोष्ठी को आयोजित किया, उसके लिए बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
नहीं, ज्यादा नहीं, हम सुनना ही चाहते थे। एंड आई एम वेरी थैंकफुल टू ऑल द स्पीकर्स, all those who participated,